He lied about $1 stocks, made millions of dollars, and when the government finally caught him, he only served 22 months in prison. But that's not even the craziest part. Because after the scams, the drugs, the yacht crashes, and the FBI raids, Hollywood turned his life into a billion-dollar movie. Today, the same man who once manipulated thousands of investors travels the world as a motivational speaker, teaching people how to sell. And the people who lost their life savings? Many of them are still waiting to be paid back. This is the story of Jordan Belfort, the man who scammed Wall Street and somehow turned it into fame. Long Island, New York, early 1990s. Inside a cramped brokerage office, the noise was deafening. Phones ringing non-stop, brokers screaming into headsets, air horns blasting across the room. Young men in expensive suits pounded their desks as thousands of dollars changed hands every few seconds. "Buy it now! I'm telling you, this thing is about to explode." Champagne bottles popped in the middle of the trading floor. Stacks of cash were thrown across desks like confetti. But behind the energy, something darker was happening. The stocks they were selling? Most of them were worthless. Yet every day, millions of dollars poured in from ordinary investors across America. Teachers, retirees, small business owners, people who believed they were getting in on the next big opportunity. At the center of it all stood one man, a fast-talking stockbroker in his early 30s who had built one of the most profitable and corrupt brokerage firms
This
in Wall
market shift
Street
is our
history.
moment to lead.
His name
Believe
was
in
Jordan
yourselves, seize the
Belfort.
opportunity, and let's
This
build our
is
future.
how a kid from Queens turned deception into an empire. Bayside, Queens, 1962. A quiet, working-class neighborhood where most people followed the same script. Get a job, work hard, and hope life turned out all right. But one kid growing up here wasn't interested in all right. His name was Jordan Belfort. Even as a teenager, Jordan was obsessed with one thing: money. One summer, while most kids were hanging out at the beach, Jordan and a friend set up a small stand selling Italian ices on the local streets. It wasn't glamorous, just a cooler, some cups, and a hot New York sidewalk. But Jordan approached it like a business. 2 for 1, but only if you tell 3 friends. The idea spread quickly. By the end of the summer, the teenage entrepreneur had made nearly $20,000. At 16 years old, that kind of money could have bought a car or disappeared on parties. But Jordan had something else in mind. He enrolled in dental school thinking it might be a path to financial success. On the very first day, the dean stood in front of the class and gave a blunt warning. "If you're here to get rich, you're in the wrong profession." Jordan listened carefully. Then he stood up, nodded, and walked out. Just like that. Because he didn't want a career, he wanted to get rich, and he wasn't going to wait decades to do it.
After leaving school, Jordan tried his first real business: door-to-door meat and seafood sales. Yes, meat. He built a small operation selling steaks, seafood, and frozen food packages directly to families. The pitch was simple: cheaper than the grocery store, better quality than the butcher. Surprisingly, it worked. Orders started piling in. Within months, the business was bringing in nearly $100,000 in monthly sales. But there was one problem. Jordan had no trucks, no warehouses, no real system to deliver what he sold. Soon, the cracks began to show. Late deliveries, spoiled meat, unpaid invoices. The entire operation collapsed under its own weight. The company went bankrupt. Most people would have taken the failure as a warning. Jordan saw it differently. Because buried inside the disaster, he had discovered something powerful. It didn't matter what he was selling: steaks, seafood, anything. Jordan Belfort could sell. And that realization would soon lead him somewhere far more dangerous: Wall Street. Eventually, Jordan Belfort found his way to the place where money moved faster than anywhere else in America: Wall Street. He landed an entry-level job at a brokerage firm called L.F. Rothschild. For the first time in his life, he was surrounded by people who talked about money the way athletes talked about championships. Young brokers in sharp suits made thousands of dollars with a single phone call. Phones rang constantly, deals closed in minutes, and everywhere you looked, there was the same energy: aggressive, competitive, addictive. This was the 1980s, an era of massive bonuses, wild parties, and a culture where greed wasn't hidden, it was celebrated. Jordan quickly realized something important. The stock market wasn't just about numbers or companies, it was about persuasion. The brokers who made the most money weren't the smartest, they were the best salesmen. Jordan studied everything: how they spoke, how they handled objections, how they pushed hesitant investors into saying yes. He was learning fast. But just as his career was beginning, disaster struck. October 19, 1987, a day that would become known as Black Monday. The stock market collapsed. Prices crashed across the board. Panic spread through Wall Street, and thousands of brokers were suddenly out of work, including Jordan Belfort. But while many people saw a crisis, Jordan saw something else: an opportunity hiding in the shadows of the market. After losing his job, eventually Jordan landed at a small brokerage firm that specialized in something most of Wall Street ignored: penny stocks. Tiny companies with shares selling for just a few dollars, sometimes even less. Serious investors usually avoided them. They were risky, unstable, often barely real businesses. But what caught Jordan's attention wasn't the companies, it was the commissions. While traditional brokers earned small percentages selling major stocks, penny stock brokers could earn 50% commissions on every sale. That meant a single $4,000 investment could put $2,000 directly into the broker's pocket. For Jordan, it was a revelation. The pitch didn't need to be perfect. The company didn't need to be famous. All he needed was a phone and someone willing to listen. So he picked up the phone and made the call. Listen carefully. This company is tiny now, but it's sitting on technology that could disrupt the entire home entertainment industry. The investor hesitated. Jordan didn't. You can wait until it's in Forbes, or you can get in before everyone else. A few minutes later, the man agreed. $4,000, just like that. Jordan hung up the phone and realized he had found the perfect game. A market with almost no rules and enormous rewards. By the late 1980s, Jordan Belfort had found his formula: high commissions, high-pressure sales, and investors who didn't fully understand what they were buying. But Jordan wasn't satisfied working for someone else. He wanted control. So in 1989, he teamed up with a friend named Danny Porish, a fast-talking hustler from Long Island with the same appetite for money and risk. Together, they launched their own brokerage firm. They called it Stratton Oakmont. The name sounded prestigious, like a firm that had been around for decades, but the reality was very different. The office sat in a small strip mall. The trading floor was packed with mismatched desks and cheap phones. And the people Jordan hired weren't seasoned financiers. They were bartenders, mechanics, college dropouts, and neighborhood kids looking for a way to get rich. Jordan didn't care about experience. He cared about hunger. Then he trained them. His system was called straight-line persuasion, a relentless sales technique designed to push a conversation from hello to send the check without giving the customer time to think. The rules were simple: control the conversation, overwhelm the hesitation, close the deal.
And it worked. Phones rang non-stop. Orders poured in. Money started flowing faster than anyone expected. Within a few years, Stratton Oakmont wasn't just a small brokerage firm anymore. It was becoming something much bigger, a machine. By the early 1990s, Stratton Oakmont had exploded. The small strip mall operation had turned into one of the most aggressive brokerage firms in America. Hundreds of young brokers filled the trading floor. Every phone call meant another investor, another sale, another commission. But Stratton wasn't just selling stocks. They were running a pump and dump machine. First, the firm quietly bought massive amounts of cheap penny stocks. Then the brokers went to work. Call after call, pitch after pitch. They flooded investors with excitement about the next big company. As more people bought in, the price skyrocketed. And just as the stock reached its peak, Stratton sold everything. The brokers made millions. The investors were left holding worthless shares. Inside the office, the atmosphere became legendary. Champagne flowed during trading hours. Strippers were brought into the conference room. Drugs were everywhere. Cocaine to speed up, quaaludes to slow down. Money flew across desks like confetti. Jordan Belfort had transformed from a small-time salesman into something else entirely. A larger-than-life figure surrounded by luxury. Mansions, helicopters, Lamborghinis, and a massive yacht he named after his wife. Inside Stratton Oakmont, the brokers had a nickname for their leader. They called him the Wolf of Wall Street. But outside that office, people were beginning to notice what was really happening, and the attention was about to turn dangerous. By the mid-1990s, Stratton Oakmont was impossible to ignore. The firm was raising millions of dollars through aggressive stock offerings, and the complaints were piling up. Investors across the country were telling the same story. They had been convinced to buy a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, only to watch the stock collapse weeks later. Regulators began asking questions. The Securities and Exchange Commission started reviewing Stratton's filings. But the real threat came from somewhere else, the FBI. A financial crimes investigator named Gregory Coleman began quietly studying the firm. At first, it was just a few suspicious trades, but the deeper he looked, the worse it became. Cold call scripts promising impossible returns, shell companies used to move money overseas, and millions of dollars flowing through offshore accounts that didn't match reported income. Coleman began building a case. He subpoenaed bank records, tracked real estate purchases, and started interviewing former brokers. Eventually, some of them began to talk. A few had already been caught in separate fraud cases. Others were angry about unpaid bonuses. Some were simply trying to save themselves. They agreed to cooperate. Some even wore wires. The conversations they recorded revealed everything. How the stocks were manipulated, how the profits were hidden, how the entire operation worked. For Jordan Belfort, the empire he had spent years building was starting to crack, and the walls were closing in.
In 1996, federal agents finally moved in. The FBI raided Stratton Oakmont. Phones were ripped from desks. Documents were seized. Hard drives were copied. The boiler room that once roared with energy fell silent. But the investigation didn't stop there. Prosecutors were building a massive case against Jordan Belfort. Wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. Charges that could send him to prison for decades. Facing overwhelming evidence, Jordan made a decision. He cooperated. He wore a wire. And one by one, the people who had built Stratton Oakmont with him were indicted. More than 30 employees were eventually charged. Some served longer prison sentences than he did. Jordan Belfort received 22 months in federal prison. But the story didn't end there. While serving his sentence, he started writing about his life. The drugs, the scams, the wild rise of Stratton Oakmont. The book became a bestseller, and a few years later, Hollywood turned it into a blockbuster film. Today, Jordan Belfort travels the world as a motivational speaker, teaching people how to sell. Meanwhile, the investors who lost their savings are still waiting to be repaid. Because sometimes, the greatest trick a con artist can pull is convincing the world he deserves a second act. And maybe the real question isn't how he got away with it, but why we keep watching stories like his over and over again. If you want more stories like this, real stories of power, money, deception, and the people behind them, then make sure you subscribe, because the next one might be even crazier.